1. My grandmother was born in the Ukraine, but immigrated to Venezuela after the Second World War. She told me this story. A young Jewish woman was kidnapped by a group of Cossacks during a pogrom. They brought her into a room and held her down, deciding who would have her first.
If you touch me, I will curse on you, the woman said. I'm a witch. The Cossacks, they laughed. I can prove it, she said. I can prove to you that I'm a witch. Their leader, he smiled and he said, very well, prove it. I'm immortal, she said, and you cannot kill me. They laughed some more. You cannot kill me, even if you shoot me. Try it. They stopped their laughing and they looked at her. Here, try it. Shoot me right here and you will see I am immortal. The Cossacks, they looked at one another, but they did not move. Shoot me in the heart and you will see I won't die. And then you'll have your proof that I'm a witch. Their leader, he thought for a moment. He then quickly took out his pistol and he shot her in the heart. The woman, she fell to the floor. Bleeding, she looks up at the man that had shot her and said, "Thank you, you imbecile."
My grandmother liked stories of heroic suicides. 2. My grandmother wanted to be a doctor when she was young, but in the Ukraine in 1935, there are very few seats at the university allotted to Jews, and all of them went to men. So she became a nurse. When she told her family in 1937 that she wanted to come to Venezuela, everyone was against it. They hardly knew where Venezuela was on a map. But her fiancé, Boris, my grandfather, he had moved here 2 years earlier to seek his fortune, and he wanted her to come join him. Business was going well for him, and he was worried about rumors of the war in Europe. I don't know if it was the imminent war, the invitation of a lover in the tropics, or both, but she came here. She was 22 years old. And the story goes that when she arrived in Caracas, she was a woman of such delicate beauty, every immigrant wanted to marry her. I've seen pictures of her, and she was stunning. And my grandfather said, "Although I brought you here, you have no obligation to marry. We've been apart for 2 years. Your feelings might have changed. You have your choice of any man in our community." My grandmother cried, moved by his words, and she told him that yes, it was her decision, and her decision was to marry him.
Another version of the story is that their marriage was arranged by their parents back in the Ukraine, and that he is asking her to choose to marry him was a testament to his liberal views. So she married him.
When their first child was born, my grandmother named her Margarita, which is the name of Venezuela's national flower. Margarita Weinberg. Her Jewish name, Mary, came from my grandmother's mother, who died when my grandmother was 2. My grandmother was the storyteller in the family, and in some arrangement made long before I was born, she had inherited the responsibility of keeping our narratives and our history alive for us.
My brother was a communist who left our village in the Ukraine to join the resistance fighters against the Nazis in Paris.
She said,
He He was one of their best spies. A street in Paris is named after him. 2 years after he joined the resistance, he was surprised on a mission inside a German arsenal. When the Nazis surrounded the German arsenal, he used all of the weapons inside to defend himself. He killed many Nazis.
She told us.
But he said the last one himself.
Heroic suicides. I grew up with these narratives. 4. At 19, my mother Margarita met a young man named Simon, who arrived in Venezuela after the war from Romania. He survived the war by sewing and selling the yellow stars of David the Jews were made to wear. He spent most of the war ultimately hiding in a small room and selling stars of David. He was 11. My mother's childhood was idyllic. Venezuela was blessed with warm weather and kind inhabitants who were welcoming to the immigrants. The war was an ocean away. And my mother heard about it only when my grandparents spoke in hushed tones about relatives who stayed behind and were now in concentration camps or dead. Simone was brought to Venezuela by his aunt, who had a successful clock shop in the center of town. His aunt brought her over to my grandmother's house to meet my mother. They went on a few dates, and then he asked her to marry him. She liked him, but her intuition told her she should not marry him. He came from such a different life. She had never known hunger or war, except in the heroic and suicidal stories of her mother. But my grandfather Boris said, "You think there's a line of men waiting to marry you? We are but a small Jewish community. He's a good man. You should marry him." My mother's strongest memory of her wedding day is standing under the canopy in the synagogue thinking,
Well, what am I doing here? This feels like suicide.
5. Their marriage was a disaster. My mother's intuition about Simone, my father, was absolutely correct. They were from 2 different worlds. My father's Eastern European upbringing, already stern and strict, was further hardened by the war. He loved Spinoza, Schopenhauer, and other severe European philosophers. He was despotic and had little patience for things other than survival. His main interests were making a living, raising a family, and attending synagogue. My mother, she loved American theater and Venezuelan balladeers and porcelain dolls. He was punctual and Germanic in his daily habits. She had the punctuality of people living in the tropics and their laid-back attitude. He perceived her as spoiled and lazy, and his inability to understand her quickly turned to fury. For her part, my mother, she considered herself superior to him. The war had left deep, deep scars. His manners were lacking or non-existent. He laughed too loudly, spoke broken Spanish, and ate voraciously. He told me that he had been hungry for so long, he thought one could never have enough food to be satiated. 6. Every Friday night, there would be a Sabbath dinner at our house. My clearest memory of those dinners was my father's bright red face and swollen veins in his neck as he yelled accusations. The Sabbath candles are not lit at the right time! You don't care about the Sabbath! What kind of mother are you? The food is terrible! You don't know how to cook! The children are too loud! What are you teaching them? He never let her answer him. And yet every time my mother tried to answer him, my grandfather would say, Margarita, let it be, shine! Enough in Yiddish. And if she tried to answer him again, he would again say, shine! And silence her. Perhaps he thought it the best way to diffuse the situation. Perhaps he himself was scared of my father. Perhaps he took pity on him. Whatever the reason, my mother was always the one encouraged to silence. Let them have his way, my grandfather would tell her. Who cares? But the most striking thing to me, even as a young boy, was that my grandmother would watch and listen and never say a word. My mother was being savagely attacked by my father, silenced by my grandfather, and my grandmother said nothing, not a word. I thought my grandmother was heroic. She had to be across the Atlantic to settle in a small Latin American village, not knowing the language, to raise 3 children in this new land, and to bear the responsibility of keeping our family's narratives alive. But what good are narratives if they lead to suicide? How could she stand by and watch her daughter be assaulted and do nothing? Did she think the harassment would end? Did she not know that my mother needed her mother to defend her? My mother, she thought of suicide many times. But she had 3 children. That's the trouble with heroic stories. My grandmother passed away 7 years ago, and in another tacit agreement, made me the writer in the family, the keeper of our stories. Members of my family come to me to ask about our past. And so in writing this story, I call my mother to make sure that I've gotten it right. And I take the opportunity to ask her about these events. Did you ever ask your mother why she didn't defend you?
I was an adult. I had 3 children. It was not for her to defend me.
She tells me.
Anyway, I think I'm part of the story wrong.
She tells me a different version of my grandmother's arrival in Venezuela, one that she heard from her aunts. In this version, after my grandfather left the Ukraine to come to Venezuela, my grandmother fell madly in love with a revolutionary communist. Her father forbade the affair. The communist loved her. the imminent war in Europe forced her to move to Venezuela and marry my grandfather. If this version of the story is true, my grandmother's heroic tale served a deeper purpose than I had originally imagined. They weren't a code of conduct or a commitment to revolt. They were simply the longings of an adolescent Ukrainian girl living in the tropics. Heroic actions that she could fantasize about, but never really act upon. The real lesson that she had learned from her father was compromise to survive. The heroine in my grandmother's pogrom story might have survived had she compromised, and her brother would have been captured and might even have lived a few more years had he not used that bullet on himself. But they decided against it. These stories were the roads not traveled, not taken, the life not lived. Suicide was good in fiction, but not in reality. In reality, silence and obedience seemed to secure survival. And heroism was a virtue to admire in a novel or a transatlantic journey, but not a recipe for life. My mother eventually divorced my father and married him again. And divorced him again. That was 10 years ago.
I'm glad you're writing this down.
She tells me.
It certainly doesn't have the flair of your grandmother's.
She smiles.
It took a long time and many rewrites, but I finally blessed your father. And I'm happy with that outcome.
She